A very good evening to all students and teachers from Market University. As Razia has just elaborated in detail, that there are many examples from the life of the Prophet which show us how the Prophet resolved conflicts between groups, how the Prophet tried to avoid war and confrontation, and how the Prophet tried to establish peace in society. But there is another aspect of the teachings of the Prophet, and that is how should an individual be peaceful? How should I be peaceful at an individual level? So, the thing is that individuals are the building blocks of a society. Individuals constitute a society. So, if an individual can be peaceful in his way of thinking, then the whole of society can be peaceful at large. So, I would like to give some examples from the Quran and from the life of the Prophet that explain how the Quran and the Prophet and Islam aims to develop a peaceful and positive way of thinking in an individual. Because everything begins from the individual. So I'd like to quote a verse from the Quran which says, good deeds and evil deeds are not equal. Do good deed in return for bad deed, and you will see that your enemy has become your dearest friend. Now, we often tend to categorize people as enemies and as friends. And this is what sows the seed of hatred in our minds for other people. So the Quran is enjoining on us to look at people as friends. It says to us that we should divide people as friends and potential friends. And we should convert that potential into actuality through good behavior. So, good relations with people is actually dependent on our own good behavior with them. So, the Quran tries to give us, it tries to dispel the we and they concept or the notion of we and they, that people of my community are my friends and I have to be good with them, and people of other community are others and I have to hate them. So the Quran tries to give us a universal way of thinking. We have to look at everybody as friends or potential friends. Now, since we live in society, often we tend to develop differences with people. Often we experience unpleasant, untoward, and unwanted experiences from other people. And that leads to a welling up of emotions of negativity, of emotions like revenge, hatred, malice, and other kinds of negativity against people, which makes us very bitter. So, what does the Quran tell us? What does Islam teach us? Islam emphasizes at these points, on these occasions, that we should practice unilateral ethics. We should adopt the principle of unilateralism. And the Prophet Muhammad often taught his companions, his followers, that you should try to live on, you should not live on a lower ethical plane, that is, do to others what others do to you. Rather, you should try to live on a higher ethical plane. Do to others as you want others to do to you. So this is the principle of unilateral ethics, which is very important for developing peaceful relations between people. And the Prophet demonstrated this principle in his life. As Razia was mentioning about the Battle of Badr, what happened was that the Prophet had to engage in one of such battles, and a lot of people were taken as prisoners. And these prisoners, as she explained, were Prophet's bitterest opponents. They did everything to nip Islam from the bud. So one such opponent was Suhail ibn Amr. So Suhail ibn Amr was a very fiery speaker. He used to denounce the Prophet vehemently in public to incite people against him and his mission. So one of Prophet's companions, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he said to the Prophet, he gave a suggestion that Suhail's two lower teeth should be pulled out to dampen his oratorical zeal. So when the Prophet heard this suggestion from Umar, he was shocked. He said that if I pull out Suhail's two lower teeth, if I disfigure him, God will disfigure me on the day of judgment, even though I am his messenger. So this is a demonstration of unilateral ethics in Islam. And what is the reason, what is the rationale behind this unilateral ethics? The reason is this concept of purification or concept of tazkiyah in Islam. The concept of tazkiyah means purification of the soul. It means that we have to develop a positive personality, a positive, peaceful personality while we are living in this world in the midst of negativities, in the midst of unpleasantness that we experience. So we don't have to return negativity with negativity. We have to return negativity with positivity. So this positive, peaceful or purified personality will find entry into paradise in the world hereafter. Islam believes that this world is not the end. There will be a world hereafter and people will be held accountable for their deeds. So in paradise, which is called Darus Salam in Islam, in the Quran, Darus Salam means the abode of peace or the abode of positivity. So only those souls, only those people will find entry to paradise who have developed themselves as positive personalities. So being born into a Muslim family or being born into a Muslim society doesn't make you automatically deserving of paradise. You have to develop, you have to work for it. You have to develop a personality deserving for it. Now, based on this entire principle of unilateralism, Maulana has given us a principle. He often tells us that you should not allow people or you should not allow a person to dictate to you. What he means by this is that when somebody makes you angry and you get provoked and respond in a negative way or even in a violent way, then you have allowed that person to dictate to you. He wanted to make you angry and you became angry. You allowed him to influence you, you allowed him to determine your behavior. So the Maulana says that you should not allow people to dictate to you. You should rise above negativities. You should rise above the way people are behaving with you. And you should remain peaceful and positive all the time. And the Prophet demonstrated this also, this principle, in a very beautiful way during his lifetime. So when he was in Makkah and he started preaching his message of monotheism to people, many people became his opponents and opponents of his message. So they used to employ various means to oppose the Prophet. And one such means that they had developed was that they had called the Prophet Muzammam. Muzammam means the condemned one. And the Prophet's real name was Muhammad. Muhammad means the praised one or praiseworthy. So they would address the Prophet not as Muhammad, they would address the Prophet as Muzammam and they would heap abuses at him. So the Prophet was totally unaffected by the insults of his opponents. One day he just smiled and he explained to his companions that the insults and the derision of my opponents are actually being directed at a person called Muzammam, while I am Muhammad. My parents have given me the name Muhammad. My birth name is Muhammad, not Muzammam. So their insults and their ridicule are actually being directed at that person, not at me. So in this way, he wisely and positively managed people ridiculing and mocking at him. And this is very much applicable to Muslims today. Last year, we were at Thailand at a conference and we met a very learned Jewish scholar on Islam. And he told us that Muslims today become hypersensitive when the Prophet Muhammad is made fun of. And they become totally offended and enraged. So he cited this incident from the life of the Prophet. And he said that Muslims think that their dignity is offended when the Prophet is made fun of. And this person said that there is a higher dignity in avoiding such a remark and even laughing it off. So that is what the Prophet taught us. That is the way of peacefully and wisely managing things, rather than becoming violent and reactionary and demanding that the person who is insulting the Prophet be killed. So often the basis for violence is hatred. Hatred for a person or hatred for a community or a nation because of a past grievance or a past bitterness. Now the Prophet gave us an example here as well. When the Prophet, as Razia said, he spent the first 13 years of his prophetic career in Makkah. And after that, when people became his opponents, and unleashed aggression against him, he had to migrate to another town called Medina, where he continued his prophetic life for 10 years. And several events transpired, and towards the end of the Medinan period, the Prophet victoriously entered Makkah. Now, there was a big question confronting the Prophet, and that was what to do with the Makkans who had, throughout his prophetic life, opposed him and did everything to erase Islam. So, as Razia said, that these people were in the position of prisoners of war, and the only punishment for prisoners of wars was death punishment. But historians have acknowledged, and they're even astonished at the fact that the Prophet forgave all the prisoners of war. He declared a general amnesty, and he said to the prisoners of war, "Go, you all are free." So a very important lesson that the Prophet taught us through this particular incident is that we should learn to forgive, and we should learn to forget the past. We should not enshrine the past bitterness. We should learn to cast it away. We should have the ability and the strength to cast away the negatives or the unpleasantness which we have experienced in the past. And we should focus on the future. We focus our entire energy and time and planning for the future. We should not live in the past. Now, lastly, I would like to say that an important basis for peace is the feeling of love and the feeling of well-wishing and the feeling of goodwill and compassion for all of humanity. So Rajat was speaking in the beginning about the fact that the West is our benefactor. Now when we think about it, we will realize that entire humanity is our benefactor, because as he said, all the modern day amenities that we enjoy, that we use for our daily living, everything has been developed by people, by history, by whole of humanity, by people of history, generation after generation. So they have helped in facilitating our life, in making our life easy. Whatever we can do, whatever we are doing, or whatever we are capable of doing has a hand of people, the whole of humanity, because they have spent a lot of time, lot of effort in research and development. That is how we are benefiting from everything, all the amenities, all the facilities around us. So that gives an outpouring of feeling of thankfulness and gratitude for all of humanity. And there is a concept in Islam of being grateful and acknowledging those who have done good to us. So the Prophet once said that if a person does not thank or acknowledge people, he cannot be capable of thanking or acknowledging God. So these were some principles which are very important, these spiritual principles which are at the basis of developing a peaceful and positive way of thinking in individuals. And when many individuals are peaceful, society as a whole can be peaceful. Thank you.